This is Professor Cruz. Welcome to week 8 of World Cultural Geography. Our topic this week is religion. Religion is another important element of culture that people value. Religion can be defined as a more or less structured set of beliefs and practices through which people seek mental and physical harmony with the powers of the universe. The rituals of religion mark the events of our lives, which include births, marriage, having children, and deaths. These are observed and celebrated. In literal terms, the word religion, derived from the Latin religare, means to fasten loose parts into a coherent whole. To fasten loose parts into a coherent whole. According to the Pew Research Center, which completed a comprehensive study of global religions in 2010, more than 80% of the world's people identify with a religious group. As you consider history and current events, you will note that religion is and has been a contributor to war, political strife, persecution, and mass movements of the human population. Geographers are concerned with the distribution of the world's religions because of the potential for religious conflict and the different ways that religions use space. Our questions for consideration this week: where are religions distributed? Why do religions have different distributions? How does religion affect the cultural landscape? We will start the discussion about religion with the United States. According to the information in your text, 22% of North Americans' population is Catholic, 18% Protestant, 28% other Christian, 25% non-religious, 2% Muslim, and 2% Jewish. This map shows data on religious adherence for the United States by county in 2010. It shows the groups with the largest number of adherents in each county. The Association of Statisticians of American Religious Bodies conducted this research. Religious bodies were invited to participate, and this map represents the 236 groups that participated. The reported data is from nearly 350,000 congregations with over 150 million adherents. So what you see here is the largest religious group in each U.S. county. You will see a concentration of red counties in the southern United States, which represent adherents to the Southern Baptist Church. A concentration of blue counties in the southwest, west, and northeast, which represents Catholics. And a concentration of Mormon adherents in the mountain states, which are and Mormonism is represented in the gray color. This map shows the largest non-Christian groups by state in the United States. Islam is the largest non-Christian group in 20 American states, mostly in the South and Midwest. Buddhists are the largest non-Christian group in the mountain and western states, and the Jewish population dominates the Northeast. Geographers distinguish two types of religion: universalizing religions, which attempt to be global by appealing to all people regardless of location or culture. 58% of the world's religions, of the 58% of the world's population practices a universalizing religion. The three universalizing religions with the largest number of adherents are Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism. Christianity has 2.1 billion adherents. There are 1.5 billion Muslims and 376 million Buddhists. Ethnic religions tend to be most appealing to one group and people living in one place, and represent 26% of the world's population. The largest ethnic religion by far is Hinduism. Others are Confucianism, Taoism, and Judaism. This map from your text shows the distribution of religions in the world. Roman Catholic is represented with the yellow color and is dominant in the Americas, Central Africa, and Europe. Protestant adherents are prominent in Northern America, Northern Europe, Southern Africa, and Australia. Islam is prominent in Northern Africa and Southwestern Asia. This graphic also includes distributions of religions by regions, which are represented with the pie charts. Note the regions that have one dominating religion, such as Southwest Asia and North Africa, as well as Latin America, compared to the regions that have more religious diversity, such as North America, Europe, and Sub-Saharan Africa. Let's spend some time looking at this pie chart, which also shows the distribution of religions. The pie chart first divides the religions into three groups. Universalizing, which on this graph comprises about 58% of the population, ethnic comprising 25%, and other at 17.4%. So technically, unaffiliated or non-religious is the third largest religious group behind Christians and Muslims. But here in the universalizing religions, you see that we have Christian divided into Roman Catholic, Protestant, and Orthodox, as well as other Christian. And then we have Islam divided into Sunni, Shiite, and other Islam, as well as Buddhism. Next slide. This graph from the Pew Research Center shows a similar distribution, but uses the major religious groups of just Christians, Muslims, and then unaffiliated, and Hindus, Buddhists, folk religionists, and then other. And then it shows 0.2% of the world's population are made up of Jews. So this graph is an example of why you must clearly define the makeup of your categories when you're creating a pie chart. This graph, which is also based on data from the Pew Research Center study, shows that nearly 3/4 of the world's people live in countries in which their religious group makes up a majority of the population. Only about 1/4 of all people live as religious minorities. This figure does not include subgroups of the 8 major groups in the study, such as Shia Muslims living in Sunni majority countries or Catholics living in Protestant majority countries. It basically combines Christians as a whole. Hindus and Christians tend to live in countries where they are the majority. 70% of all Hindus live in 3 Hindu majority countries, which are India, Mauritius, and Nepal. And nearly 90% of Christians are found in the world's 157 Christian majority countries. Muslims and religiously unaffiliated people also live in countries in which they are the predominant religious groups. Muslims are majority in 99 countries. The religiously unaffiliated make up a majority of population in 6 countries, of which China is the largest. The others are the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hong Kong, Japan, and North Korea. This graph shows the median age of adherents of religious groups, and it shows that some religions have much younger populations on average than others. This is somewhat attributable to the geographic distribution of the religious groups. Those with large shares in the fast-growing developing countries tend to have younger populations. Those concentrated in China and in advanced industrial countries where population growth is slower tend to be older. The median age of the world population in 2010 was 28. Muslims with a median age of 23 and Hindus with a median age of 26 were much younger than the global median age, which was again 28. All other religious groups have higher median ages, with Jews having the highest median age of 36, which is more than a dozen years older than the youngest group, Muslims. This map shows the origins and diffusion of the 3 major universalizing religions. Universalizing religions have a precise place of origin, often based on events of the lives of an influential man. Ethnic religions are generally not tied to a single historical individual, They often have unclear or unknown origins. So this is similar to folk and popular culture. Buddhism originated about 2,500 years ago in the experiences and teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, who was transformed into the Buddha. He grew up in present day Nepal and spent his life preaching his view across India. Different branches formed over competing interpretations of the teachings of the Buddha. Christianity originated about 2,000 years ago with the teachings of Jesus, who was born in the city of Bethlehem in present day Israel and was raised as a Jew. Christianity began to diffuse through Palestine, through Europe during the time of the Roman Empire, and continued after the empire's decline. Paul of Tarsus, a disciple of Jesus, traveled extensively through the Roman Empire as a missionary. Christian branches formed over the differences of which set of doctrines to adhere to. Roman Catholics accept the teaching of the Bible as well as the interpretation of those teaching by church hierarchy headed by the Pope. Orthodox Christians have rejected doctrines that the Catholic Church has added since the 8th century. Protestants believe that individuals have primary responsibility for achieving personal salvation through direct communication with God. Islam originated about 1,500 years ago through the Prophet Muhammad, who was born in the city of Mecca in present-day Saudi Arabia. At age 40, Muhammad received his first revelation from God. The Quran is a record of God's words as revealed to the Prophet Muhammad. By the time Muhammad died at age 63, the armies of Islam controlled most of present-day Saudi Arabia. The two branches of Islam formed over a disagreement of which person had more rightful claim to the succession of leadership from Muhammad. So what we see here is that Asia is the home to each hearth for Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism. Followers transmitted the messages preached in the hearths to people elsewhere. Each of the three main universalizing religions has a distinct diffusion pattern. Buddhism, represented in green, hearth is in present-day Nepal and northern India. Christianity is in present-day Israel, and Islam is in present-day Saudi Arabia. Buddhism diffused primarily east toward East Asia and Southeast Asia, Christianity west toward Europe, and Islam west toward northern Africa and east toward southwestern Asia. Christianity originated in the eastern Mediterranean and spread by relocation diffusion through Christian missionaries. The most notable was Paul, who we mentioned before. He traveled extensively through the Roman Empire. Many people at that time practiced pagan or polytheistic religions, so they believed in more than one god. Christianity later spread by hierarchical diffusion through military conquests and the conversion of rulers. Roman emperors Constantine and Theodosius were instrumental in spreading Christianity in Europe and areas near the Mediterranean Sea. Migration and missionary activities continued to diffuse Christianity all over the world, and through permanent resettlement of Europeans, Christianity became the dominant religion in the Americas, Australia, and New Zealand. Some are predominantly Catholic, while others are predominantly Protestant. Christianity has more recently further diffused to Asia, where it is now the most widely practiced religion. Within a century of Muhammad's death, Muslim armies conquered areas in Africa, Asia, and Europe. Some of the territory that was conquered by Islamic armies was eventually lost, and some of those areas started practicing another religion. As was the case with Christianity, Islam diffused well beyond its hearth. And Indonesia, which is the world's fourth most populous country, is predominantly Muslim because Islam spread as Arab traders brought the religion there in the 13th century. It diffused rapidly from its point of origin in present-day Saudi Arabia. Within 200 years, Muslims controlled much of Southwest Asia and North Africa and southwestern Europe. Subsequently, Islam has become the predominant religion as far east as Indonesia. Buddhism also diffused through missionaries, but diffused relatively slowly from its origin in the northwestern India. The person who is most responsible for the diffusion of Buddhism was Emperor Asoka, who facilitated diffusion through the Magadhan Empire. That's 273 to 232 BC. The empire controlled a large area of South Asia between the 6th century BC and the 8th century AD, and Asoka sent missionaries to territories neighboring the empire. Buddhism was introduced to China along trade routes in the 1st century AD. It later diffused to other countries in East Asia, though it lost its original hearth original support that was in India. So now let's take a look at some religious landscapes. Christian churches were traditionally constructed to be the tallest building in the city. Churches represent holy structures for many Christian branches and are built large because of the importance given to the attendance at the services. When the location for the National Cathedral in Washington was secured, the location on Mount St. Alban was considered the most commanding spot in the entire Washington area. Mormon communities also have the local temple in the middle of town. The one in the picture is in this slide is in Provo, Utah. Now, Muslim mosques are not considered sacred in Islam, but instead are important gathering places for worship. And Buddhism features elaborate pagodas which contain relics of the Buddha's body or clothing. Pagodas are typically tall, many-sided towers arranged in a series of tiers, balconies, and slanting roofs. Pagodas are not designed for congregational worship. Place names near Quebec's boundaries with Ontario and the United States show the impact of religion on the landscape in terms of the names of places or toponyms. In Quebec, a province with a predominantly Roman Catholic population, a large number of settlements are named for saints, where relatively few religious toponyms are found in predominantly Protestant Ontario, New York, and Vermont. You see religious spaces in public places such as a prayer and reflection room on a university campus. Our landscape is also filled with cemeteries. Climate, topography, and religious doctrine combine to create differences in practices to shelter the dead. Christians, Muslims, and Jews all practice burial in dedicated cemeteries. Cemeteries were typically the only public open spaces in congested urban places prior to the 19th century. In New Orleans, shown above, the above-ground cemeteries are often referred to as cities of the dead. They are above ground because the water table is very high in much of New Orleans, as much of New Orleans is below sea level. So this week, you will continue to explore the religions that dominate the world map and consider how religion shapes the cultural landscape. As you travel throughout the DMV, look around and see how religion has shaped the cultural landscape in our area. Next week, we'll look at ethnicity. We'll think about where ethnicities are distributed in the United States, and we'll specifically explore how racial demographics are remaking America. Have a great week exploring the religious landscape.